Take a slow breath in and release it gently. Let your body settle like a paper boat on still water. You are here now, safe, calm, and ready to drift. The night is warm and soft. Feel the air just cool enough to brush your skin like silk. Hear the wind stirring through the branches above, the gentle rustle of bamboo leaves, and the low creak of old wooden beams, resting for the evening. A hush, deeper than silence, settles over everything. Now, picture this. In a quiet valley tucked beneath the emerald folds of mist-covered mountains, a small village slumbers under starlight. It is the eve of the Mid-Autumn Festival in Hangzhou, many centuries ago. The year is 1378, and the moon tonight is said to be the roundest in decades. At the very edge of this village where peach blossoms grow wild and lantern poles lean from last season's storms, there sits a humble courtyard. There, a young girl named Lin kneels on a mat of hand-woven straw. Her fingers are stained with ink, her robe smudged with crimson dye. And beside her, with eyes half closed in concentration, is her grandfather, Master Lu. Master Lu was once a lantern painter for the imperial palace. Now, he lives quietly, teaching only one pupil, his granddaughter, how to capture light with silk and shadow. Before them lies an unfinished lantern, a circle of delicate bamboo ribs, wrapped in cream-colored silk that glows faintly under a flickering oil lamp. Its surface is blank, waiting for stories to be painted, for memories to be brushed into being. Tonight, the wind carries a scent of jasmine and river moss. Far off, a flute hums from a neighboring home. Soft laughter drifts in waves as villagers prepare dumplings and boil tea. Lin dips her brush into the ink pot. She exhales slowly, like her grandfather taught her, so the breath steadies her hand. With gentle strokes, she paints the outline of a carp. Its tail curls as if swimming upstream. Each scale is placed with care, each line whispering an intention. Grandfather watches her. He doesn't speak. Only when the fish is complete does he murmur. A carp that swims against the current becomes a dragon. Lin smiles. She's heard this story many times. But tonight, it feels different. Tonight, the lantern is not just decoration. It is a vis of 4 dreams, 4 stories, 4 silent wishes whispered into the moonlight. And the moon is nearly full. The brush glides again, now dipping into gold ink, catching the soft light of the oil flame beside her. Lin adds waves beneath the carp, painting them in slow spirals that mirror the wind's quiet dance outside their home. Each curve and swirl seems to hum, as though the lantern itself is beginning to breathe. Outside the courtyard walls, the village pulses with quiet energy. Lanterns sway from eaves and trees, their silk skins dyed red, orange, and plum. Children chase each other with empty candle cups, giggling in hushed tones so as not to disturb the spirits believed to wander during festival nights. From the nearby tea house, the scent of ginger and rice cakes floats on the air. Grandfather Lu pours warm chrysanthemum tea into tiny porcelain cups, steam curling upward like a whisper. He hands one to Lin and says softly, "A good lantern must not only shine, it must speak." Lin tilts her head. "Speak to whom?" "To the night, to the ancestors." "To the wind," he says, voice nearly lost in the creak of the courtyard gate swinging open. "But most of all, to the moon. The moon remembers every lantern it's ever seen." Lin sips her tea and looks up at the sky. Clouds drift lazily, like silk being pulled across a loom. She can just see the edges of the moon's glowing face, raw and patient. A few stars blink quietly beside it still, watchful. Tonight, the entire village will release lanterns at the same time. It's a tradition that goes back generations, older even than the emperor's rule. Some say it began when a child once wished for a father's return from war, and a lantern carried that hope across the sea. Others believe the light shows the ancestors that they are remembered, still honored beneath heaven's gaze. As Lynn paints a lotus beside the carpets, petals soft and open, she thinks about her own wish. She hasn't told anyone, not even grandfather. But she feels it rising in her chest, quiet and certain. She wants to know what it feels like to send something of her own into the sky. Not just any lantern, but her lantern. One shaped by her hands. One carrying her story. She adds the final stroke, a small swirl at the lotus's center. And just like that, the painting is complete. She looks up at grandfather. He nods. "You're ready," he says. "Now, we give it a name." Lynn places her brush gently into the basin of water, watching the ink melt away in slow, swirling clouds. She wipes her fingers on a linen cloth, soft and worn from years of pigment and polish. Grandfather Lou reaches for the lantern frame, turning it ever so slightly so that the full design catches the flickering glow of their oil lamp. The fish seems to swim through the silk. The lotus blossoms float gently in the painted stream. For a moment, everything is still. Then, with the gentlest of voices, he asks, "What shall we call it?" Lynn thinks for a while. She listens to the wind, brushing through the leaves outside, to the soft knocking of bamboo chimes swaying under the roof eaves, to the sound of water dripping in a nearby jar. All of it feels like music. All of it is part of this moment. Finally, she whispers, "Let's call it River Wish." Grandfather smiles. "Yes," he says. "A lantern that travels like a river and carries your wish with it." Outside, the village bell tolls once, a soft, low note that vibrates through the bones of the valley. It is the signal. Lantern time is near. Villagers begin to emerge from their homes, their faces glowing with candlelight and the quiet joy that comes from shared memory. Children carry their lanterns like treasures, some shaped like rabbits, others like peaches, turtles, or boats. Grandfather rises slowly, his joints cracking softly. He retrieves a thin candle from a carved wooden box, wax sealed in linen for this one special night. Lynn holds the lantern steady while he fits the candle inside and lights it with a coal from the brazier. The flame flickers once, twice, and then stands still. The inside of the lantern glows to life, illuminating the carp, the lotus, and every gentle stroke Lynn painted with care. She gasps quietly. It's more beautiful than she imagined. The silk seems to shimmer as if stirred by unseen waves. Together, they step into the courtyard. The air is thicker now, but not heavy, just full. Full of hope, of memory, of stories about to be released into the sky. Villagers line the road that leads to the temple hill. There, at the summit, the lanterns are released one by one, or all at once each, lifting slowly into the heavens. Lynn and her grandfather join the procession, their feet crunching softly over pebbles. Torches line the path, flames bowing in the breeze. She clutches the base of River Wish, careful not to jostle the frame. It is fragile, yet filled with strength. She looks up at the sky again. The moon is higher now, bold, glowing like a pearl resting on deep velvet. The climb to the temple hill is slow and quiet, each step muffled by the worn earth of generations. Stone lanterns line the edges of the path, their hollows holding flickering candles that seem to breathe in unison with the crowd. The villagers speak in hushed tones, out of reverence or nostalgia, perhaps both. Even the youngest children, usually spirited and wild, seem to understand the sacred hush of this moment. Above them, the sky stretches wide and undisturbed. It is the kind of night where the stars feel close enough to touch. The Milky Way glows faintly, as if echoing the river below that gave the village its name. Grandfather Lou walks beside Lynn, his hand resting gently behind her back. Though his steps are slower now, His posture is proud, upright, a quiet dignity earned through years of craft and memory. This festival, he has said many times, is not just about celebration, it is about remembering those who came before and those who will come after. As they near the summit, a gentle breeze picks up, lifting the edges of Lynn's robe. She tightens her grip on the lantern's base, not from fear but from anticipation. They pass the incense tree, an old, twisted trunk wound in ribbons and faded paper wishes. It has stood for over 300 years, according to village lore. Some say it grew from a single incense stick planted by a widow who waited for her husband to return from sea. Others believe it grew wild, touched by the gods themselves. Every family has tied something to its limbs. Lynn's own mother, who passed when she was very small, once wrote a poem and tucked it in the bark. Grandfather never said what it was, only that it was beautiful. Lynn pauses for just a second beneath the incense tree. She closes her eyes and places one hand gently on its trunk. The bark is rough, but warm, and still pulsing with the heat of countless wishes. Then, the temple bell rings again. Twice this time. It is the call to gather. Villagers form a gentle circle near the hill's edge, where the wind is strongest and the sky seems to lean down and listen. A boy no older than 7 releases the first lantern. It rises awkwardly at first, then steadies, spinning slightly as it climbs into the night. A ripple of quiet awe passes through the crowd, and then another goes, and another. Soon, the sky begins to blossom with light. It is time. Grandfather turns to Lynn and smiles. "Go on, little lantern maker," he says. "Let yours fly." Lynn steps forward, the silk lantern cradled gently in both hands. The flame inside flickers like a heartbeat, steady, quiet, alive. The breeze at the hilltop curls around her ankles, lifting her hair from her shoulders, as if urging her forward. The other lanterns have already begun their ascent, drifting skyward in silent procession, each glowing orb a message, a memory, a wish. She takes a breath, deep and slow, the kind her grandfather taught her before the first stroke of every painting. And then she releases it. Her hands open, just slightly, letting go of the base. River Wish hovers. The flame flutters once. Then, with a hush like silk slipping across wood, the lantern rises, upward, slow and sure. The carp dancing in soft motion, the lotus gliding like a boat in calm waters. Gasps rise gently from the villagers as they watch it join the others, glowing softly among them. But to Lynn, the world grows quiet, as if the night has stopped just for her. She follows it with her eyes as far as she can, until it becomes one with the others, no longer separate, but part of the sky story. Her heart feels light, as if something in her has lifted with the lantern. Grandfather steps up beside her, his presence warm and grounding. "You gave it your voice," he says. Lynn nods. "Do you think the moon rabbit will hear it?" He smiles, the corners of his eyes crinkling like old paper. "Oh yes," he whispers. "And the rabbit always remembers." The wind carries the scent of burned wax and warm clay. From below, the village shimmers with candlelight. The trees sway gently. The bells of the temple chime, a final time soft, slow, and deep enough to echo in the bones. The crowd begins to disperse, some in silence, others murmuring quietly about the beauty of the night. But Lynn stays at the edge of the hilltop, watching the sky. The stars seem to blink a little brighter now, and the moon round and full glows as though smiling. Somewhere above, her lantern floats on, lighter than air, carrying her secret wish into the unknown. Behind her, grandfather begins a soft tune, an old lullaby sung at many festivals, its notes slow and winding, like a river through reeds. Lynn hums along, the melody like a cradle, and slowly, gently, She lets her thoughts drift, as soft as silk, into the warm folds of the night. The village sleeps. Lanterns still drift above like slow-moving stars, casting a warm, flickering glow over rooftops and winding paths. The distant sound of flute music has faded into memory, leaving behind only the gentle rhythm of the wind and the hush of crickets nestled in garden walls. Lynn and grandfather walk home side by side, their silhouettes long in the moonlight. Each footstep is careful but unhurried, guided by the lanterns still strung between homes and trees. Silk rustles softly with each breeze, and wind chimes tinkle faintly like laughter from another time. As they reach the gate to their courtyard, grandfather stops and places a hand on the old wooden frame. He looks up at the sky where river which has now disappeared into the velvet night, says, "You know, in the old capital, lantern makers used to stay awake all night after the release." Lynn turns to him, eyes wide with curiosity. "They believed the ancestors came back on the wind," he continues softly, "and that staying awake let you feel them passing through the garden, pausing in the corners of the house, remembering what it felt like to be home." Lynn's breath catches at the thought. She pictures shadows gliding gently along the floor, unseen feet brushing over stone, and voices faint in musical greeting. The wind chimes like old friends. "Would you like to stay up?" grandfather asks. Lynn nods. "Can we?" He opens the gate with a quiet creak. Inside the courtyard, the oil lamp still burns, casting golden pools over the mat and scattered painting tools. Grandfather stokes the brazier, and its warmth spreads slowly through the air, mixing with the sweet smoke of cedar chips. Lynn curls up beside him, tucking her knees beneath her robe. She watches the tiny embers rise into the night like sparks trying to catch the stars. And then, without speaking, grandfather begins to tell a story. Not in a loud voice, not even clearly, but slowly, as though each word is a dream being folded and passed from one generation to the next. He speaks of the Lantern Rebellion, a strange and gentle uprising that took place long ago in a neighboring province. When an emperor forbade lanterns during winter for fear of fire, the people painted glowing symbols on translucent rice paper instead, and hung them without candles. Every night, the village would light no fire, but their thoughts burned bright, shared in silence and trust. Even now, he says, some people believe those symbols are hidden within the folds of real lanterns, whispers of resistance wrapped in silk. Lynn closes her eyes as he speaks. The images form slowly, softly, like clouds painted on silk screens. Villagers moving in moonlight, messages hidden in paint, hope glowing where it wasn't allowed, and behind it all, the sound of the breeze brushing gently through their garden, pausing beneath the peach tree, whispering, "We remember." Lynn leans back slowly, letting her head rest against the smooth wood of the courtyard post. The night is deeper now, the stars brighter. Grandfather's story floats in her thoughts like petals on still water, and her heartbeat slows with every whispered word. She lets her eyes drift to the lantern above them, one that grandfather made many years ago. Its paint has faded, and one corner is slightly torn. But it still sways proudly in the wind, casting soft dappled shadows across the garden. "I was your age when I made that one," he murmurs, eyes watching the silk as it shifts. "I painted it with crushed plum and ink from temple soot." Lynn traces the edge of the lantern's light with her finger. "What did you wish for?" He smiles, a quiet, tired kind of smile. "I wished for a voice." She tilts her head. "But you talk all the time." He chuckles softly, the sound barely louder than the rustling leaves. "No, little lantern, not that kind of voice," he says, almost as if to himself. "I wanted to speak in a way that others could feel, even when I wasn't in the room. A voice that lived in silk, and smoke, and shadow." Lynn says nothing, but her fingers brush lightly over the empty paper lanterns stacked beside her. She understands. She's felt it in the way Riverwish floated light. Yes, but full of meaning. Do you think people heard your voice? She whispers. I think, grandfather says, that when someone stares at something you've made, and their breath catches just for a moment, then yes, that's your voice reaching them. The warmth from the brazier deepens, and the log settles with a soft crack. Cedar smoke curls toward the stars, winding past the lantern's seams. Lynn watches the trail rise, spiraling like a sleepy dragon. It disappears so quietly, she barely notices. She pulls a thin blanket over her shoulders and rests her chin on her knees. The silence is not empty. It hums gently with the memories of 1,000 stories, some told aloud, some whispered through brush strokes and flame. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a fox yips once, then is gone. The bamboo knocks gently like distant footsteps. And Lynn, eyes heavy now, begins to imagine what her next lantern might look like. Maybe a crane this time, or a peony in full bloom. Or maybe something no one's painted before, a river that flows upward, or clouds filled with words only seen in moonlight. She doesn't need to decide just yet. The night is long, and soft, and still unfolding. And above, Riverwish is still drifting. Far beyond the mountains now, over fields and forests and quiet temples, it floats, a glowing memory moving gently across the edge of dreams. The night carries on, stretching its velvet canopy across the sky. Lynn has not yet fallen asleep, but her thoughts drift like a lantern over calm water, weightless and slow. The fire in the brazier has soft embers, glowing like sleepy fireflies nestled in clay. Grandfather has stopped speaking, though his breathing is rhythmic and calm. Each inhale and exhale a lullaby in its own right. Lynn listens to it, letting the sound soothe her the way only familiar things can. It's the same pattern she heard as a baby, lying in her cradle while the wind nudged their shutters. She shifts slightly, not to move but to settle. Then, from a corner of the courtyard, a tiny sound. Not startling, not sharp, just curious. It's the rustle of paper. Not the wind, not footsteps. She opens her eyes. The stack of unused lanterns shifts, ever so gently, as if something or someone has touched it. Lynn blinks, sleep heavy but not afraid. She watches the stack. Nothing else moves. Then, from beneath the pile, a tiny glow, faint, flickering, blue. Lynn tilts her head. But it isn't the orange yellow of firelight. It's soft blue, like starlight caught in a raindrop. Quietly, she rises and walks barefoot across the stones. Each step makes a soft pad against the ground, and the night air hugs her arms like silk. She kneels by the lanterns. The glow is clearer now. It's coming from inside one of the unused frames, one made of translucent reed paper, plain and unpainted. And yet, inside it, swirls a shimmer like moving water. Lynn reaches out and touches it lightly. The moment her fingers brush the paper, the glow pulses just once. And then, the lantern unfolds itself. Not violently, not magically, but gently, like a blossom opening at dawn. The paper stretches and reshapes the frame, widening. And from the inside, a shape begins to appear. A map, or what looks like one, drawn in delicate lines of light, shifting slowly across the inner surface of the lantern. Rivers, mountains, symbols, tiny villages drawn like ink dots, stars hovering above them. A winding path, looping back and forth, as though it leads to somewhere, or someone. Lynn stares, lips parted in awe. She does not call for grandfather. She does not speak. Instead, she watches as the glow dims, and the lantern settles again, as if nothing ever happened. Her heart is beating now, not fast, but deep. She sits beside the lantern for a long time, the warmth of the ground seeping into her legs. She doesn't know what she's seen, but it felt like an invitation, a whisper meant just for her. And somewhere in the trees, the wind stirs again stronger, this time carrying with it the scent of plum blossoms and the faintest hint of cinnamon, and a reminder that night still holds secrets. The breeze grows slightly cooler, like a ribbon of mountain air winding its way through the courtyard walls. Lynn wraps her blanket tighter around her shoulders, but her eyes remain fixed on the lantern, now still, but no longer ordinary. The map within had shimmered so softly, and yet she remembers every detail, each curve of the river, every mountain's peak drawn with luminous grace. It hadn't looked like the region she knew, but there had been one thing, a small mark shaped like a lotus. And she had seen it before, on the silk ribbon her mother once wore. The realization sends a gentle shiver up her spine, not of fear, but of wonder. Like finding a forgotten lullaby in the folds of an old robe. She rises, her bare feet pressing softly into the stone path as she walks to the edge of the garden. There, hanging from the peach tree, is the ribbon. Faded pink, with an embroidered lotus, barely visible now in the moonlight. She touches it, and the fabric flutters under her fingers, as if recognizing her. A voice echoes in her memory, her mother's. Not a full sentence, just a fragment. The lotus shows the way. She never understood it before. It sounded like something from a story, a line meant to comfort a child at bedtime. But now, it feels like a key. She glances back at the lantern, still folded, still glowing faintly from within, like an ember waiting to breathe. Maybe it wasn't just an invitation. Maybe it was a guide. She pats quietly back to the brazier, where grandfather still sits, now asleep, his head gently bowed. His breath is deep and steady, his hands relaxed in his lap. She doesn't want to wake him, but she does want to tell him everything. So she kneels beside him and carefully reaches for her ink brush and paper scroll. She begins sketching the map as best as she can, remember line by line, curve by curve, the river's looping path, the 4 mountains circling the center. And in the middle, the lotus symbol, just as she saw it. The brush glides easily across the paper. Each stroke feels more like memory than guesswork, as though her hands remember what her eyes only briefly saw. When she finishes, she sits back and exhales. The ink shimmers slightly in the moonlight. She knows what she has to do. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, she will begin searching. Not wildly, not without thought, just a gentle walk beyond the edge of the market, past the cedar groves and down toward the old tea fields. She'll follow what the map whispered. Even if it leads only to an old ruin or a forgotten trail, she knows it will be meaningful. Because tonight, something awakened. And in the world of lanterns, whispers never come by accident. The stars begin to fade, one by one, as the soft blush of dawn nudges the sky. A lavender hue curls along the horizon, and dew settles quietly across the stones. Len sits curled by the brazier, now dim, the last of its warmth holding on like a secret, not yet ready to leave. She hasn't slept. But she isn't tired. Instead, she feels light-like. Her thoughts are feathers carried gently by the morning breeze. She looks at the sketch of the map in her lap, the ink lines crisp against the scroll. Though the glow from the lantern is gone, the image in her mind remains vivid. She hears the soft creak of floorboards as grandfather stirs. He blinks once, then again, as if waking from a dream too deep to speak of. Lynn says nothing. Instead, she offers him the scroll. He adjusts his glasses slowly and peers at it. A long pause, then softly. The lotus path. You know it, she whispers. I know of it, he replies, voice still hushed by sleep. It's said to lead to a garden hidden from time. A place where artisans once gathered to paint the sky onto lanterns and their dreams into the air. Lynn leans in, barely breathing. I thought it was only legend, he says. But legends begin somewhere. The tea kettle begins to whistle, high and faint. Grandfather rises to tend it, the scent of jasmine leaves unfurling into the cool air. He returns with 2 small cups, offering one to Lynn. They sit quietly, sipping the warm, floral brew, the silence between them filled with possibility. Finally, grandfather breaks it. If you follow it, he says, go gently. And listen. The path is old, and it doesn't like to be rushed. Lynn nods, cradling the cup in both hands. A butterfly flits into the courtyard, unusually early. Its wings patterned in white and gray just like the brushstrokes on grandfather's very first lantern. It hovers for a moment, then glides over the gate. Lynn watches it go. Later that morning, she packs a small satchel, a sketchbook, a few brushes, inkstones wrapped in silk, a folded rice bun, and the scroll. Grandfather ties the strap gently, tucking a lucky coin into the side pocket. Write to me in the clouds, he says with a smile. She promises she will. As Lynn steps beyond the courtyard, the village is just beginning to wake. Vendors stretch their arms, roosters call softly, and the scent of steamed rice and sesame oil floats from kitchens. But Lynn doesn't follow the market road. She turns west, where the sun warms the mist rising from the trees. And with each step, the memory of the lantern's map guides her not with urgency, but with a soft pull, like silk drawn through the fingers. She does not know exactly where she's going. But that's the nature of lantern whispers. They reveal their meanings only to those willing to listen with their hearts. The path Lynn follows is not marked on any map in the village archives. It isn't paved or trodden by carts. It is a whisper of a path, hinted at only by the bend of grass, the tilt of mossy stones, the way birds seem to pause mid-song as she passes. With each step, the forest deepens around her. The air is cool and rich, with the scent of wet earth and old cedar bark. Light filters through high branches like golden threads, weaving lace across the ground. She stops once to listen. There it is, a Gina sound not of this world, and yet not foreign. A kind of chime, not made by metal, but by something softer, like silk ribbons brushing together in wind. It's faint, barely audible. She moves toward it, slowly. A dragonfly skims past her cheek. It has translucent wings, and its body glows a subtle green, almost jade-like. She watches it for a moment as it circles and disappears behind a cluster of tall reeds. Just beyond the reeds, she sees the outline of a stone archway half buried in vines and moss. She steps closer. The archway is old, perhaps centuries. Carved into the sides are symbols she's only seen in grandfather's scrolls, symbols of wind, stars, and fire. At the top center, the lotus. She exhales slowly, her breath curling into the cool morning air. The same lotus from her mother's ribbon, from the lantern's map, now etched in stone. She passes beneath it. Immediately, the light changes. It becomes softer, diffused as if the very air were wrapped in silk. Sounds quiet, not from absence, but from reverence. She's entered a forgotten part of the world, one that remembers stories even after people forget to tell them. The path winds down gently through a bamboo grove. The stalks sway without wind, creaking gently, whispering among themselves. And then, the chimes again. This time louder. Rhythmic, delicate, Lynn follows it. At the edge of the grove, the trees part, revealing a hidden glade. She gasps softly. Lanterns, hundreds of them. Not floating, not strung but resting gently in a wide, clear pool at the center of the glade. Some are shaped like flowers, others like birds mid-flight. A few glow faintly, their inner light pulsing like sleeping hearts. The pool is perfectly still, reflecting the sky so clearly it seems like a second world beneath her feet. At the far edge, a small wooden structure, perhaps a shrine or studio, leans into the shade of an old cherry tree, its petals fluttering down like whispers from the past. Lynn doesn't step forward just yet. She kneels by the edge of the water and places her hands on the ground. "I've found it," she says, though she doesn't know to whom. The wind stirs gently, as if nodding in agreement, and the lanterns, floating quietly in the water, shimmer in response one by one. Lynn watches as the shimmer moves across the water like a wave of starlight. Each lantern responds in turn, not with brightness, but with subtle acknowledgement. They glow the way memories do when recalled with warmth. She dips her fingertips into the pool. The water is cool, smoother than any stream she's touched before. It clings to her skin as though reluctant to let go. Suddenly, from the center of the pool, a single lantern begins to drift toward her. It's shaped like a carp, its body crafted from silvered reed paper, with fins so delicate they ripple as though alive. Its eyes are tiny pieces of obsidian, and they seem to blink slowly in her direction. The carp lantern stops just at the edge of the water where Lynn kneels. She reaches out. The moment her fingers brush the top of its head, something shifts inside her. A hush falls deeper over the glade, not from silence but presence. It's as if the forest, the water, even the sky is holding its breath. The lantern opens slightly, just a crease along its spine. From within, a soft scroll floats out, curling in the air before settling into Lynn's lap. She lifts it gently. The scroll is old, yet unblemished. The paper smells faintly of sandalwood and ink. She unrolls it. Inside, a map once again, but not of rivers and mountains. This one is of stars. Constellations spiral across the parchment, each marked with brushstrokes, so fine they seem etched by moonlight. Tiny notes written in classical script appear between the stars, guiding the reader through a celestial journey. Her eyes pause on one word, repeated often: Shingland Star Path. It's not a place, but a philosophy, a belief from centuries ago among the lantern artisans that each soul has a path written among the stars. And through careful listening and creation, one can align with it. Lanterns were more than decoration. They were celestial instruments, maps of destiny, messages between the heart and the heavens. Lynn's breath, catchy. She had never been taught this. The artisans had faded long ago, their workshops abandoned or destroyed, their teachings lost in the rush of new technologies. And yet, here it was, preserved, waiting. She looks back at the carp lantern. It blinks again, slow. Lynn presses the scroll to her chest and bows her head in gratitude. Then, from the corner of her eye, she notices a light inside the wooden structure across the water. It flickers softly, like a lantern freshly lit. She rises, crosses the glade with bare, careful feet. At the threshold of the studio, she pauses. The door is slightly open. Inside, she hears the soft rustle of paper, the steady scratch of a brush, and a voice, old, gentle, singing an unfamiliar lullaby. Lynn steps inside, and the air changes again, like stepping into memory. The room smells of ink and plum blossom. Scrolls line the walls, stacked in precise rolls on wooden shelves that reach toward the ceiling. Brushes dangle from cords, sorted by length and bristle type, their tips still dark from use. At the center of the room, a figure sits at a low table. They do not look up. Their hair is silver, braided in a coil atop their head. Their robe is linen white, with cuffs embroidered in the same lotus pattern Lynn had seen again and again. They dip a thin brush into an ink dish and move it across parchment with the kind of care only gained from decades of practice. Every stroke sings of balance. Lynn doesn't speak. She watches. The figure completes a final mark, then places the brush down gently. Only then do they look up. Their eyes are clear, like water that has seen many seasons. "You came," they say softly. The voice is neither surprised nor expectant. It is as if they had merely been waiting for the right breeze to bring her. Lynn swallows. "I followed the lantern," she replies. The old artisan nods. "It only shines for those whose hearts echo with remembrance." They gesture for her to sit. Lynn does so, folding her legs beneath her. On the table before them lies a parchment with unfamiliar constellations, different from the one she received by the pool. These are newer, shifting, unfinished. The artisan reaches out and touches Lynn's hand, then guides it toward the brush. Every star path needs a hand to continue it, they whisper. Lanterns, remember. But people must help them speak. Lynn hesitates. She's drawn before, but never with this weight, this purpose. Still, she dips the brush. The ink is deep bluminite sky in liquid form. Her hand moves, at first, uncertain. Then, gradually, the strokes come more easily. A sweep here. A curve there. The artisan hums softly behind her, the same lullaby from before, now a rhythm guiding her flow. She draws a new lantern. Not a shape she's seen before, neither bird, flower, nor carp. This one resembles a moon wrapped in clouds, gentle, shy, mysterious. When she finishes, the artisan smiles. "There," they say. "You're first." Lynn gazes at it. It feels familiar, though she's never drawn it before. "What does it mean?" she asks. The artisan's eyes twinkle. Meaning comes later. Lanterns don't tell stories, they invite them. Lynn feels warmth bloomed quietly in her chest. The artisan rises, walks to a cabinet, and returns with a small box of lantern silken dyed, soft as breath. They place it in her hands. "You'll need this when you begin your own lantern," they say. Lynn clutches it gently, almost afraid to crease it. Outside, the wind stirs again. And somewhere beyond the trees, another chime rings out. The artisan guides Lynn to the rear of the studio, where a small wooden door opens onto a hidden path. Beyond it, a narrow trail meanders through a mist-kissed grove of ancient cherry trees. Their blossoms, pale as breath, fall in slow spirals, carpeting the ground in pink and white. "This was once the lantern garden," the artisan says, in a hush. The place where apprentices learned the dance of light and silence. Lynn's sandals press gently into the soft earth. The petals yield beneath her with no resistance, like they, too, remember footsteps long vanished. To her left, the remnants of small workstations emerge. Stone pedestals covered in moss. Brushes frozen in jars of dried ink. Bamboo screens collapsed with age. But some things remain untouched. A kiln stands quietly near the garden's edge, its chimney bent slightly like a nodding elder. An arbor, wrapped in flowering vines, shelters rows of silk threads. Their colors still brilliant, despite the year sunrise orange, twilight blue, cloud gray. These were dyed by the last master, the artisan says. Each hue drawn from petals, roots, and rainwater collected at dawn. Lynn pauses, fingers brushing the threads. They hum faintly beneath her touch. Even the colors remember, she murmurs. They enter a clearing at the center of the garden, where a single lantern pole stands. It's made of weathered bamboo, taller than any Lynn has seen, its base bound in braided gold thread. No lantern hangs from it. Now only the empty loop remains, swaying gently in the breeze. This is where each artisan would raise their first true lantern, the artisan explains. When it swayed just right, and its glow matched the breath of the wind, we knew it was ready. Lynn steps closer. She imagines her own lantern there, the moon-wrapped tin clouds, casting a light as soft as snowfall, as steady as heartbeats. She takes a deep breath. The air here feels different, older, quieter, as if it's been waiting a long time for a voice to stir it. I want to learn, she says. To really learn. The artisan smiles. A lantern does not begin with the hands, they reply gently. It begins with silence. They hand her a folded cloth. Within it, a blank scroll, a brush of gray fox hair, and a vial of ink sealed with wax. These are your first tools. But your truest guide, they add, tapping her chest lightly, is in there. Lynn holds the kit like a sacred thing. Then, with the artisan's blessing, she returns to the small wooden studio and begins her studies. Not rushed, not driven, just present. Each day is gentle, filled with quiet repetition and the steady rhythm of brush and breath. She learns to hear the silence before a chime, the pause between ink strokes, the unspoken story of every line. And at night, the lanterns in the pool outside still float, watching, glowing faintly, as if nodding in approval with every page she fills. Days become weeks in the hush of the lantern studio. Lynn loses track of time, though she never feels lost. Each morning arrives like a soft exhale, and each night wraps her gently in the glow of drifting lights. Her hands, once unsure, now move with grace. She no longer second-guesses the brush's path. Instead, she follows the rhythm her breath provides. Upstroke, pause, downstroke. She learns how to mix the dyes using forgotten recipes left in the margins of old scrolls. One blend, made from orchid root and early mist, produces a violet hue that shimmers like starlight when dry. Another, brewed from crushed shells and ash, yields a soft silver gray, the exact shade of twilight fog. The artisan teaches her the stories behind each material. This thread, they say, holding up a pale blue filament, was spun on a night when the moon rose without a shadow. Lynn leans in, enchanted. You can only dye it in silence. Even whispers will unsettle the color. Lynn begins to understand these weren't just tools. They were living echoes of something ancient. Everything used in lantern making held memory, held meaning. One morning, as the sun barely brushes the treetops, Lynn wakes to a different sound. Not the chimes, not birdsong, but voices. Distant, curious. She peeks beyond the studio walls and sees a group of children from the village, standing at the edge of the grove. Their eyes are wide, catching the light of the floating lanterns. They don't speak. Not yet. Lynn steps forward slowly. The children remain still, like deer at a stream. She kneels down and smiles, offering a tiny lantern the size of a plum, glowing faintly in her hands. It's shaped like a rabbit. A girl, perhaps no older than 7, reaches out and takes it, her eyes filling with quiet awe. The lantern glows a little brighter in her palms. Did you make this? One of the boys finally asks. Lynn nods. Yes, but only after listening to the garden first. The boy frowns. To the trees. To everything, Lynn replies, her voice a soft hush. The air. The light. Even the ink wants to be heard. The children say nothing but their eyes speak. The artisan, watching from a distance, comes forward and places a hand on Lynn's shoulder. Now, they say gently, you're beginning to understand what it means to keep the craft alive. That afternoon, Lynn sets up a long, low bench in the shade of the cherry trees. She brings out old brushes, scraps of silk, small pots of pigment. The children return, quiet, but eager. They mimic her movements with care, and even the youngest hold their breaths before drawing the first line. That night, 10 small lanterns float beside hers, in the still poolage glowing faintly, tenderly, as if dreaming their first dreams. The pool glows brighter now, not because the lanterns compete with one another, but because they harmonize, like softly played notes in the same lullaby. Each child's lantern holds a unique tone of light: soft lemon yellow, pale rose, dusk. They flicker gently on the surface, forming a constellation across water. Lynn sits cross-legged beside them, a cup of warm barley tea in her hands. She listens to the evening not just to its sounds, but its silence. The creak of branches in the breeze, the faint rustle of silk on the wind, the distant hum of the kiln as it cools, brick by patient brick. The artisan joins her, lowering themselves onto a cushion with a sigh like settling leaves. You've become what the old ones used to call a light keeper, they say. Lynn turns, brows gently lifted. A keeper of what? Of the flame behind the flame, they reply. The story behind the shape, the silence beneath the glow. Lynn turns her gaze to the pool. It feels more like I'm just listening. That's what keeping truly is. A hush settles between them, neither heavy nor empty, just full like a night sky right before the stars emerge. The artisan sips their tea. When I was your age, they begin, I tried to make lanterns that would impress. Big ones, bright ones, ones that flew higher than the tallest trees. Lynn smiles softly. What happened? They burned too fast, they say with a small laugh, or fell apart before they reached the sky. They lean closer, voice lowering like a bedtime murmur. It took me many years to realize the gentlest glow travels the furthest. Lynn watches a tiny lantern, shaped like a turtle, drift past. Its light is barely there, like the last breath of a candle. And yet it moves with certainty, its soft shimmer leaving ripples of calm behind. The artisan continues. Lanterns were once sent down rivers to guide lost souls. Not because they were bright, but because they were consistent, tender, trustworthy. Lynn nods. In that moment, she feels the weight of her role not as a creator, but a custodian, a whisperer of lights. The children return the next day, and the next. Some bring parents, a few bring grandparents. Soon, the grove is gently alive with footsteps and lowered voices. A kind of school, though no one calls it that. They dye fabric, using petals soaked overnight in moon. They tell stories while tracing stars with brushes. They hum lullabies that float through the trees like invisible threads. And with each passing week, the studio grows not crowded, but warm, full. The artisan begins stepping back, quietly watching from beneath the arbor. They know the rhythm of passing torches, the rhythm of letting new hands shape old stories. And Lynn, she now dreams in brushstrokes. Sometimes, Lynn wakes before the birds. She rises before dawn, while the mist still holds the world in its careful grip. The air is cool, the sky still dreaming. She wraps herself in a robe that smells of cedar and ink, and steps outside barefoot, letting the damp earth greet her. She walks the perimeter of the grove slowly, as the artisan once did, brushing her fingers along the old bamboo fence, pausing where the moss grows thickest. She listens to everything. The soft breath of the kiln, still warm from yesterday's firings. The occasional chirp from a sleepy sparrow. And always, the distant chime of the lantern wind, faint and high, like the echo of a bell rung long ago. At the pool, she kneels and lights a single lanterners. The moon-wrapped dash in. It floats out, graceful and sure, casting gentle reflections across the water. She sits by its glow and begins her quiet morning sketching. Sometimes she draws flowers, sometimes faces, but, mostly, she sketches what she cannot explain, a curl of smoke, a ripple in the air, the ghost of a story she hasn't heard yet. These sketches, she stores in a wooden box beneath her mat. She never shows them to the children. Not because they're secret, but because they're still becoming. The artisan appears just after sunrise. They bring warm buns filled with lotus paste and a small pot of chrysanthemum tea. They sit beside her, not speaking. Lynn breaks the silence only once. "Do you ever miss the way it used to be?" she asks quietly. The artisan takes a long sip before answering. "Sometimes," they admit, "but the lanterns aren't meant to hold the past. They're meant to carry it forward." Lynn thinks of the children's laughter, the soft click of their brushes, of how the grove now hums with gentle life. She nods. "Yes," she says. "It does feel like they're carrying something." That afternoon, a new family visits. A grandmother with a cane of twisted oak. Her steps are slow, but her eyes are bright. She watches the children dye silk and mix ink. Then, slowly, she approaches Lynn and places a small object in her hands. It's a folded piece of parchment. Inside, a sketch faded, aged, but still clear. A lantern, shaped exactly like Lynn's own, wrapped in clouds, cradling a moon. Lynn looks up, heart fluttering. The old woman smiles softly. "I made one like that," she whispers. "Many, many years ago. Before the last lantern festival." She taps Lynn's hand. "You didn't invent it. You remembered it." Lynn's breath catches. Somewhere inside her chest, something gentle and vast begins to unfurl. Like silk across still water, like memory returning home. That evening, Lynn places the old sketch beside her own, under the flicker of an oil lamp. The resemblance is uncanny cloud curl, each gentle crescent of the moon. She traces the lines with a fingertip, as if trying to feel their age. The grandmother had offered no name, only a smile and a story. She once lived here, long ago, when the grove still held open festivals. When hundreds of lanterns floated down the stream like drifting stars. And then, as she said with a faint laugh, time moved in, and the light stepped back. Now it had returned not with fanfare, but with footsteps on moss and laughter in the afternoon breeze. Lynn keeps the sketch safe. Not tucked away, but hung in the studio just above the kiln's mantel. A quiet reminder that nothing truly vanishes. It only waits to be remembered. One late night, as moonlight pools across the floor like spilled milk, Lynn begins preparing a very different kind of lantern. Not for practice, not for teaching, but for a journey. She selects the silk herself, a shade of dusky plum, like a sky about to dream. She spins the bamboo frame while humming the tune the artisan once used when making their own. The rhythm wraps into the ribs of the lantern like lullabies pressed into wood. At dawn, she walks to the river's edge. It's the first time she's left the grove since arriving. The artisan joins her without a word, simply carrying a small fire pot to light the lantern's core. Together, in a shared silence, they raise the finished lantern. It glows softly, pulsing with calm. Then, with fingers steady and hearts full, they let it go. The lantern rises, slowly at first. Its glow dances across the tall grass, casting long, gentle shadows. Then, with a tilt of wind, it climbs above the trees, past the bell tower, toward the waking sky. Lynn watches until it's only a speck, barely flickering. A single cloud floats by and seems to pause, as if curious. Then both vanish into morning. Where will it go? She asks softly. The artisan smiles. Where it's needed. They return to the grove hand in hand. That day, the children's brushwork feels more focused, their colors more vibrant, as if the lantern's flight had whispered something back to them. Lynn begins teaching not just the brush strokes, but the silences between them. She speaks of wind patterns, of dyes that change tone depending on the time of day, of how the shape of a lantern can mirror a person's mood. Each lesson is gentle, like a leaf resting on water. The grove sways with rhythm, learning, laughing, remembering. And always, at night, new lanterns join the pool. Some shaped like birds, some like stars, all glowing with stories no longer forgotten. Rain comes, as it always does in the highlands, quiet at first, then steady and warm. The grove doesn't mind. The bamboo drinks deeply, and the moss turns a richer green. Leaves glisten like lacquered jade beneath the soft drizzle. Lantern making does not pause. Instead, it adjusts. Children gather in the covered studio, the rhythmic tapping of rain on the roof adding to their quiet concentration. Len lights the hearth, not for heat, but for companionship. Its soft crackle fills the air like a gentle voice saying, "You're safe here." Today's lesson is different. Lynn unfurls a long scroll of parchment, aged, brittle at the edges. The children gather around, eyes wide, breath held. It's an old map. But not of lands, of skies. Drawn centuries ago, it shows the traditional flight paths of ceremonial lanterns, routes that once connected villages, temples, and mountaintop shrines, each path marked not in distance, but in time. The journey of a lantern, Lynn murmurs, was once counted by how long its light could be seen, not how far it flew. Fingers trace inked paths shaped like spirals, waves, and clouds. One boy asks, "Did lanterns really reach the sea?" Lynn smiles. Some say they, others say they became stars before they got there. The rain softens too, Miss. The artisan arrives, holding a bundle of old scrolls and weathered fabrics, donations from a traveler who heard whispers of the grove's return. Among them is a faded silk banner with a symbol Lynn doesn't recognize, an eye wrapped in wind. The artisan unrolls it with reverence. This, they whisper, belonged to the keepers of Windlight, an old guild who believed lanterns could guide dreams across continents. Lynn's eyes widened. They believed dreams could travel. Not just believed, the artisan says. They trained for it. They studied wind patterns, the phases of the moon, and the way thoughts ripple through sleeping minds. She traces the eye with a fingertip. It feels familiar. Like the first night she arrived, standing beneath a sky that felt both foreign and welcoming. That evening, inspired by the guild's forgotten ways, Lynn and the children craft lanterns meant not to float but to sway. They tie them with soft silk threads to the bamboo trees. Each one catches the breeze and moves with purpose side to side, back and forth. Like breathing. As the night deepens, the grove becomes a lullaby of movement. Lanterns sway like kelp in an ocean of air. Light ripples, casts moving shadows, paints the forest in soft waves of gold. Visitors passing by often pause. They don't always understand what they're seeing, but they always stop and they always smile. Because something in the rhythm speaks to them. Something ancient, quiet, and deeply human. The grove now holds a stillness that is not empty, but full. It has become a listening place. Even the wind seems to move more gently here, as if bowing to the stories it carries. By the third moon of the season, the artisan has begun writing less and watching more. They often sit beneath the arbor, hands folded, eyes following the children's soft footsteps like a painter admiring a landscape come to life. Lynn, meanwhile, begins teaching new patterns, some from the scrolls, some from memory, and some from dreams. Her dreams are no longer fleeting. They linger like the scent of plum blossoms after rain. In them, she sees lanterns that whisper, not burn. Lanterns with woven messages in their silk. Lanterns that arrive on windowsills just before a sorrow, as if sent to catch the tears. She wakes from these dreams, calm / not startled, as though the dreams themselves are stories returning home, seeking her. One morning, she wakes to find a small bundle at her doorstep, wrapped in indigo cloth and tied with gold thread. No name, no note, only a folded sheet of parchment inside. On it, a child's drawing, a lantern shaped like a sleeping cat, floating beside a crescent moon. Beneath it, written in blocky letters, "I dreamed this last night. Is it real?" Lynn smiles and carefully pins the drawing on the studio wall. A new gallery is growing, one not made of finished works, but of glimpses. Children's dreams, fleeting sketches, imagined maps, all whispers of something true. She names the wall, the lantern within. Each time a child pins something there, they light a small tea candle beneath it, a tiny ritual, a quiet honoring. Soon, the wall flickers with more than drawings. It holds wonder. One evening, a boy too shy to speak during the day brings her a bundle of dried lavender. He doesn't say a word, only points to his sketch on the wall. A lantern with lavender sprigs tied to its tail, flying toward a mountain. Lynn tucks the lavender into her sash and whispers, "I believe it flew." The boy smiles for the first time. The artisan begins carving again. Not lanterns but small charms made of sandalwood and cherry bark. They give them to the children without fail. Some shaped like waves, others like stars or pine needles. They say each one is a memory carved, not from thought, but from stillness. Lynn keeps hers in a pouch by her heart. It's shaped like a sleeping eye. When she presses it gently, she remembers the first lantern she ever saw float. She remembers the hush of that moment, the way light can speak without sound. The grove continues to bloom, not with flowers, but with voices. Soft ones, true ones, like the light of a lantern that has traveled far, yet still remembers where it came from. The season of mists arrives quietly. Dawn becomes a soft veil, and the sun no longer hurries to rise. Everything slows. Leaves turn the color of embered TD pokers and bruised golds, and the air smells of cinnamon bark, damp earth, and stories waiting to be told. In the grove, the lanterns begin to take on new forms. No longer just round or oval, they now resemble small boats, sleeping animals, folded hands. Each child brings their own dream shape, and Lynn helps them translate it into silk and thread. One girl makes a lantern shaped like a teacup. She says it's for her grandfather, who never finished his last cup before the war took him away. Lynn helps her dye the silk a gentle brown and paints tiny steam curls rising from the rim. They light it together, just as twilight kisses the trees. The lantern floats gently down the water trail, the girl whispering behind it, "Finish it now, Lolo." Another child builds a lantern shaped like a turtle shell. When asked why, he simply says, "Because they carry their home with them." Lynn nods, and the artisan carves a small wooden turtle charm to match. The charm is tied to the lantern's base. As it floats away, it spins slowly, like it's dancing on the breath of a lullaby. Visitors return, drawn by word of mouth, or perhaps by dreams. Many don't speak much. They arrive, walk quietly through the grove, then leave a note or a flower by the studio door. One morning, a scholar arrives with a worn leather satchel. Inside are old journals, maps, and fading records of ancient lantern festivals some believed lost to time. He offers them freely, saying, "Lanterns aren't meant to be archived. They're meant to be That evening, Lynn and the artisan read aloud from the brittle pages. They discover that, centuries ago, a rare blue ink was made from the crushed petals of midnight iris, an ink believed to carry the dreams of the writer into the lantern's silk. Intrigued, the children beg to try. They hunt for midnight irises near the old stream, and when none are found, they plant seeds for next season. Until then, they mix dyes of deep indigo and twilight blue and pretend. The grove becomes a place of layered memory. Old stories unearthed, new ones planted. Every lantern now bears a secret, a folded note, a symbol, or even a single whispered word tucked within the ribs. Some say that if you sleep near the lantern path and listen closely, you'll hear those whispers in your dreams. The artisan calls this practice memory binding. Lynn simply calls it remembering out loud. At night, the grove glows softly, not with light alone, but with meaning, a tapestry of luminous hopes, gentle echoes, and breath-light dreams, drifting upward like mist returning to the stars. The grove begins to sing, not in melodies, but in moments. The crunch of feet on frosted leaves, the hush of threads pulled through silk. The distant hoot of a night owl standing sentinel near the bell tower. Each sound becomes a note, and together they weave a lullaby. Only the grove understands. Lanterns now hang from every reachable branch. Some flutter in the breeze like sleeping moths. Others remain still, swaying only when the wind leans in to tell a secret. Lynn notices that fewer children rush now. They take their time, letting silence sit with them like a welcome guest. The artisan, too, slows. They've begun recording stories not in words, but in lantern patterns. Each shape and color, each knot and rib spacing, holds meaning, a language of glow and form. They teach Lynn how to read them. One night, she studies a green lantern with a spiral seam and a single gold tassel. "I think it says ... beginnings," she whispers. The artisan nods without looking. Or maybe ... circles becoming paths. Under their guidance, the grove becomes a gallery of living stories. Not written on parchment, but in fabric and flame. Each night before sleep, Lynn walks the grove in silence. She stops at each lantern, breathing in its light. A ritual now, one that grounds her. At the edge of the grove, a small circle of rocks marks the center of the original flame, the first lantern ever released here, long ago. Children now gather around it once a week. They sit in a hush, listening to stories told only in gestures and the soft flares of a nearby fire pot. No one speaks, but everyone hears. It is during one of these quiet circles that Lynn feels it, a change in the air. A pulling. Like the wind, remembering a name. That night, she dreams not of floating lanterns, but of wings. Of cranes soaring over moonlit rice fields. Of lanterns tied to their feet, glowing as they fly. And of a far-off village, watching the sky, whispering thanks. She wakes with a start, heart calm but full. The artisan is already waiting. "You saw it, didn't you?" She nods. It's time. They speak no more of it that morning. Instead, they prepare a new kind of silk, one treated with a rare oil found only in the valley, known for catching moonlight like dew. The fabric shimmers without flame, and when wrapped, it breathes. Together, they shape the crane lantern. It has wings that curve gently upward, tail feathers that ripple even without wind. Lynn ties a silver thread around its neck, not to tether it, but to remember the moment it first lifted. The children watch, silent and reverent. The release is simple. They walk to the edge of the stone ring, bow once, and let it go. It doesn't rise like the others. It glides. Catching an updraft, it soars over the grove in wide, patient loops before fading into mist. The artisan smiles, Some lanterns were never meant to float. They were meant to fly. Winter tiptoes into the valley. It doesn't crash in, but rather gently takes a seat beside the grove, cooling the breath, icing the edges of the stream, and brushing the bamboo with silver fingertips. The grove does not resist. It simply adjusts. Lanterns are now lined with fleece thread, their ribs wrapped in warm cotton. Light burns lower, softer amber instead of gold, like the glow of a distant fire just visible through a snowy window. Children wear mittens stitched by village elders. They work slower, huddled close, but still they come. Still they build. One boy creates a lantern shaped like a sleeping fox curled into itself. He says he saw it in a dream, warming a traveler who had lost their way. Lynn paints the fox in gentle strokes of rust and ash gray. When lit, it looks as though the fur is breathing. Visitors begin leaving small tokens behind. A feather tucked into a tree, a polished stone with a single rune, a folded note with nothing but the word stillness. The grove accepts them all. There are no rules, only reverence. The artisan, watching these offerings piled gently near the old arbor, begins construction of something new. Not a lantern, a well of whispers. It is made from bamboo and river stone, open at the top, with silk cords descending like roots. Each cord has a slip of parchment tied to the end. Visitors and children are invited to write a thought, a name, or even a silence, then knot it into the cord and let it sway in the wind. Some knots are loose, some tight. All are welcome. Over time, the well becomes dense with paper, swaying with messages that never speak aloud. But those who stand near it often close their eyes and smile, as if they hear something, just on the edge of dream. Lynn begins guiding children through evening meditations now. Not formal teachings, just quiet moments. She leads them in breathing like lanterns, in slow, hold, out, soft, in glow, hold, out, drift. Then she tells short stories, ones without heroes or endings. Just images, a floating feather, a hill that hums, a cloud shaped like a doorway. Some children fall asleep right there in the studio. Others sit, eyes closed, listening with their bones. The artisan often watches from afar, their carving slowed, their notes fewer. But their eyes, those steady, kind eyes, spark brighter each night. One evening, snow begins to fall. At first, just one flake, then 1,000. The children gasp, lanterns in hand, as the grove becomes a snow globe of drifting light. The lanterns glow through the flakes, creating soft halo, light and frost, dancing in a quiet ceremony. Lynn whispers, "Tonight, even the sky wishes to rest with us," and so it does. Morning arrives in soft shades of blue and pearl. The grove lies hushed under a quilt of snow, stitched by the night sky's careful hand. Everything is quieter now. Even the birds seem to whisper instead of sing. The children arrive bundled in scarves and wool, their breaths curling into the air like tiny dragons guarding secrets. They don't speak at first. They look around, wide-eyed, at the lanterns wearing snow like little hats. Lynn smiles. She doesn't brush the snow away. She lets it stay. It feels right, like the grove has accepted a new layer of memory. Inside the studio, the hearth crackles gently. Mugs of warm rice milk sit steaming, their surfaces swirling like cloud reflections. The artisan begins preparing winter silk thicker mat, better for holding warmth in the folds. Lanterns now carry not just light, but comfort. One girl makes a lantern shaped like a mitten. Inside it, she places a note that says, "This one is for anyone who's cold in the heart." When released, the mitten floats slowly, bobbing gently in the chilled air. It looks like it's reaching out for a hand. That evening, Lynn begins a new tradition. She calls it the glow within. Each child is given a small mirror. They're asked to look into it, not to find flaws, but to see the flicker inside themselves. Not every child understands at first. Some laugh nervously, others look away. But gradually, they begin to see not just their reflection, but the light behind their eyes. Afterward, they're invited to design a lantern that represents that light. No rules, no shapes required. Just whatever feels true. Some lanterns are circles, others are stars. One boy makes a lantern shaped like a cracked shell, its center glowing bright. He calls it, "What Happens After the Breaking." Lynn places that one near the studio window, where it glows all night like a quiet promise. The well of whispers grows heavier. Snow gathers gently on the cords, but the messages inside stay dry, protected by the love that holds them. Visitors now bring music, soft flutes, hand drums, strings that hum with the rhythm of the breeze. They play not for performance, but as part of the breath of the grove. One night, a woman with silver hair plays a lullaby on a bowed instrument older than memory. The notes fall like snowfall, gentle, persistent, and holy. The children listened, curled into blankets, their lanterns beside them like sleeping companions. The artisan hums along. Lynn closes her eyes and lets the melody settle into her spine. She realizes then that the grove isn't just a place. It's a feeling. A rhythm, a soft, glowing yes in a world that often forgets to whisper. As the new year quietly approaches, the grove prepares for its most sacred ceremony. The Night of Forgotten Names. It's a tradition rediscovered from an old scroll found in the scholar's collection. Once every winter, villagers would gather to remember people, places, and dreams whose names had faded. Not to mourn, but to honor the echo. The children help gather branches and weave a frame shaped like an open book, to be hung between two ancient trees. It will hold lanterns dedicated not to memories, but to mysteries. Each lantern bears a single word. Maybe, once, almost, still. There are no rules about who they honor. One child creates a lantern for the bird I dreamed of but never saw. Another dedicates hers to the grandmother my father never met. The artisan lights the first lantern and says, "For those who were without needing to be known." And in the hush that follows, the grove seems to nod. That night, as the lanterns rise into the navy sky, they do not float in a line. They drift apart, wander like thoughts lost in twilight. And it's perfect. Visitors begin bringing offerings to leave in the snow beneath the lantern trees. A broken compass, a single glove, a song written on rice paper. Lynn collects these gently and places them in what she now calls the nest of the unfinished. Not discarded, just waiting for their time. In the mornings, frost glistens on the studio's windows like lace. The artisan and Lynn sit together with warm tea, breathing in the quiet. Sometimes they speak. More often, they don't. And that's enough. One day, a child arrives without a voice. She communicates through gestures and glowing eyes, her laughter silent but bright. She points to a swan-shaped lantern, then to her heart. Lynn understands. They spend the day building together. The girl ties her favorite ribbon, a pale green one, around the swan's neck. When night falls, she doesn't release it. She holds it close, whispers something into its silk belly, then places it gently on the snow beside her. It doesn't rise. It simply glows beside her feet, casting warmth onto her boot. And somehow, that, too, is flight. Later, Lynn asks the artisan what it means to let something go. The artisan replies, "Sometimes letting go is not releasing. It's remembering without weight." And Lynn writes those words on a leaf and places it in the nest of the unfinished. That night, a quiet snowfall returns. The lanterns do not fight the flakes. They welcome them draped in white, their light softened but undimmed. In the stillness, the grove becomes a breath. Inhale of memory. Exhale of peace. And all who rest beneath its branches dream of things that never needed to be explained, only held. Winter deepens, yet the grove feels warmer than ever. Not in temperature, but in spirit. The snow becomes familiar now, like an old friend who knows when to stay quiet and when to sparkle. Each step on the forest path crunches softly, the sound folding into the hush of the trees. Lanterns now hang lower, closer to the earth, almost bowing under the stillness. Lynn begins to wake before dawn, drawn by a presence she can't explain. Not a voice, not a call, just a feeling that the grove has something to say. She brings a small stool and sits near the well of whispers as the stars fade. She listens, not to words, but to wait, to silence, to the pause between breath and thought. And slowly, she begins to hear. Soft images come into her mind. A hand letting go of another. A child sleeping under a tree whose leaves whisper lullabies. A bird circling over water, waiting for the sky to settle. She opens her eyes to a sky blushing pink. Dawn. The grove has spoken. That day, Lynn makes a new lantern. It is simple clear silk with nothing inside but a single seed. She calls it tomorrow. She does not light it. She hangs it in the center of the arbor, where sunlight can find it. Children gather around, puzzled. It doesn't glow, one says. It doesn't need to, Lynn replies. Some lanterns shine on the inside. The artisan hears this and smiles without turning. That evening, a traveler arrives. An old man with hands like driftwood and eyes like dusk. He carries nothing but a pouch of dried herbs and a bell. He asks no questions. He simply sits near the hearth and begins to hum a deep, thrumming sound like wind beneath a door. Lynn brings him tea. He takes it with a bow and asks, "Is this the place where lanterns remember?" Lynn thinks for a moment, then says, "No. It's the place where we do." The man nods and begins making a lantern from pine needles and bark thread. It crackles when lit, sounding like a tiny fire. He doesn't give it a name. He doesn't release it. He tucks it into a hollow tree, whispers something inside, and walks away before morning. Lynn checks the lantern later. It's gone. But the hollow tree glows faintly from within, like it had swallowed a dream. More people begin to come, not tourists, but pilgrims. Not for photos, but for pause. They don't ask to see anything. They ask if they may sit. And they do by trees, by stones, in circles of snow. Some weep, some laugh, some simply breathe for the first time in a long while, and all of them leave behind something soft. Late one afternoon, the wind changes. It's not colder or stronger, just different, like it's bringing stories from beyond the rich dailies long buried in snow and silence. Lynn stands near the old arbor, sensing the shift. Her fingers brush a low-hanging lantern, and it sways as if nodding. She whispers, "It's coming soon, isn't it?" The grove does not answer, but the shadows stretch a little longer than usual. The children, too, begin to feel it. They grow quieter in their crafting, more thoughtful in their choices. One begins weaving feathers into a lantern, frame another uses melted ice for watercolor. Their work becomes soft prayers. The artisan begins preparing a new space, a circle of river stones with a single woven mat in the center. No tools, no fire. Just stillness. Lynn watches him work and understands. This is not for building, it's for being. That evening, she gathers the children. They sit around her like pebbles around a pool. "Tonight," she says gently, "we don't tell a story. We listen for one." At first, they fit, but as the moon rises and the lanterns hum above them, something begins to settle. They hear a fox brushing through the snow. icicles cracking in rhythm, the quiet shuffle of bamboo against bamboo. One child closes her eyes and whispers, "I think the story is sleeping." Lynn nods. "Yes. So let's keep it warm." They cover the well of whispers with a soft shawl. They lower their lanterns. They tuck their laughter beneath their scarves. And in that perfect silence, the grove becomes a cradle. The next morning, something waits at the edge of the path. A bundle, wrapped in plum-colored silk, tied with a ribbon the shade of river moss. Inside, a letter. It reads, "To the ones who still remember how to forget the world, thank you for building light without asking for it back. May this small thing find you before spring." Beneath the note is a single silk lantern already lit. No fuel. No wick. It simply glows. Lynn doesn't ask who left it. She simply places it above the studio door. From then on, everyone calls it the lantern that found us. It's the only one that never moves, never flickers, but its light changes each night. Sometimes golden, sometimes blush, sometimes a color no one can name. Children guess it changes based on dreams. One insists it turned ocean blue after she dreamed of swimming with whales. Another swears it went violet the night he fell asleep to the sound of his mother S's heartbeat. The artisan says nothing. But Lynn notices him glancing at it more often. Hands still in mid-carve, the studio becomes quieter. Not somber, just slower. As if even the tools know to whisper now. Outside, frost lingers longer on the branches. Inside, stories wait with their hands folded. As the deepest part of winter arrives, the days blur softly, one snowfall into another, one hush folded gently into the next. Lynn begins to lose track of the calendar. There's no rush here, no dates that demand remembering. Only moon phases and the rhythm of footsteps on the frosted path. The artisan starts a new series of lanterns, not for the sky, but for the ground. He plants them gently along the edges of the walking trail, each one half buried in snow. They glow upward, casting golden halos onto the white. Lynn asks what they're for. He replies, "Not every light is meant to rise. Some are here to hold us." And indeed, the path becomes more than a way through it. Becomes a cocoon. Visitors walk it slowly, their faces softened by the glow at their feet. Some pause, some kneel, some whisper thank you to the snow. One evening, Lynn finds a small clay figure placed beside a buried lantern. It's a rabbit, curled into itself, sleeping. There's no note, just the warmth of its presence. She leaves it there. Later that night, wind begins to sing through the upper branches. It's not the kind of wind that bites, it's the kind that remembers. You can almost hear voices carried in it, like pages being turned in the sky. Children sleep soundly in the loft, cradled by the scent of warm cedar and beeswax. Lynn tends to the hearth, feeding it slowly, watching the fire blink like a tired storyteller. The artisan sits nearby, quietly whittling a lantern frame into the shape of a closed eye. When Lynn sees it, she smiles. Is it meant to open? He shakes his head gently. No, not every vision needs to be seen. Some are felt. She understands. The next day, a group of elder women arrive from a distant village. They carry lanterns made of woven straw and pressed flower petals, hardened with resin. Their hands are wrinkled like old paper, their laughter gentle and full of knowing. They tell Lynn they once studied here, long before the war, when the studio was new. They ask if they may sit in the same place they used to gather. Lynn leads them there. The circle of stones is still intact, slightly overgrown, softened by time. The women kneel slowly, smoothing the snow with their palms, as if greeting an old friend. Then, one by one, they light their lanterns and begin to hum. Their song is wordless. It rises and falls like the tide. Lynn does not understand the melody, but, her body does. It's a lullaby for the land. After the final note drifts into the sky, the eldest woman presses a dried flower into Lin's hand. A blue gentian for the ache that blooms after beauty, she whispers. Lin presses it close to her heart. That night, the stars seem lower. Not falling but listening. In the days that follow, the lanterns begin to hum not with sound, but with presence. It's in the way the air feels warmer near them, how birds perched just beside their glow, how even the snow seems to hesitate before falling through their light. Lin wakes earlier now, drawn by a rhythm that isn't quite hers. She stands barefoot on the studio porch, wrapped in a thick wool cloak, steam curling from her tea. She watches the horizon, waiting for the first blush of dawn, and there just as the sun kisses the ridge she sees it. A soft shimmer, like the sky exhaling. It happens for only a moment, but it's enough. She begins to keep a journal not for thoughts, but for colors. Each morning, she scribbles a single shade and gives it a name of her own. Lantern, breath blue. Frost on kindness. The color of waiting well. The artisan peeks at the pages one evening and chuckles. You're naming the unspeakable. She grins. I'm trying to remember what can't be remembered. That night, the children gather for a new kind of story. Lin calls it the story without an ending. It begins with a feather drifting. They each take turns continuing the tale, never finishing it only, handing it off like a sleeping child pass from arm to arm. One says, the feather belongs to a bird that never lands. Another says it's from the pillow of a dreaming queen. Another child insists the feather is not real. At all just a thought someone lost when they sneezed under the stars. They giggle, but soon the laughter quiets again. The story moves like a breeze, through open windows, gentle, ungraspable, and sacred. No one ends it. Lin doesn't write it down. She just lets it live in the air. Later, in the still of night, a strange silence falls over the grove. It's not the absence of noise, it's the presence of awe. The trees seem taller. The snow deeper. Even the shadows move slower. A fox trots along the lantern trail. Tail high, ears flicking. It pauses beside the artisan's newest creation, a lantern shaped like a spiral. Chelan stares at it for a long moment before vanishing into the frost. Lin watches from the window, whispering. Even the wild things understand. She dreams of roots that glow underground, reaching for each other in the dark. Of ancient hands carving stars into bark. Of laughter echoing across frozen lakes, still ringing in the ice. The next morning, the children find footprints all around the grove, small ones, in curious loops, but none lead in or out. Lin simply says, some guests come only to remember how to leave gently. That afternoon, she and the artisan light the well of whispers for the first time in weeks. They do not speak, they only listen. And the fire within it does not crackle. It sighs. The days stretch softly now, like long exhalations wrapped in silk. Even the wind seems to slow, brushing past the trees with reverence instead of haste. One morning, Lin finds the artisan sitting cross-legged beneath the arbor, surrounded by blank silk sheets. He's not carving. He's simply waiting. When she asks what he's doing, he murmurs, letting the silence paint first. So she joins him. They sit in stillness, breath sensing with the sway of unlit lanterns above. Not to create, not to plan, but to be. Around them, the grove listens too. Branches creak like sleepy old friends, adjusting their shoulders. A single petal, how it survived the frost, no one knows, falls gently onto the silk before them. The artisan picks it up. He doesn't press it. He places it in the center of a lantern frame and says, this one will never burn. They call it the petal that waited. That evening, Lin begins a new tradition, the hour of whispered wishes. It's not a ceremony. There is no music, no guide. Just the ringing of a soft brass bell at twilight. Each person, young or old, comes forward with a lantern of their own making. They do not speak aloud. They only hold the lantern close to the heart. Then release some float. Some sink into some hang themselves gently on low branches, as if choosing to stay. No one asks what the wishes are. No one needs to. The air feels heavier afterward, not with burden, but with care, as though the grove itself holds their hopes gently in its arms. That night, Lynn lights a small lantern and does not release it. She keeps it beside her bed, where the glow softly spills onto her pillow. She dreams of her mother's voice not speaking, but humming, and a tiny version of herself, chasing fireflies barefoot through a summer field. She wakes with tears that don't sting, only warm. The artisan, too, grows quieter in those days. Not withdrawn, just deeper. He begins using softer woods. He shapes lanterns without tools, pressing curves with the pads of his fingers, like folding memories into clay. One of his final creations that season is so fragile it seems made of breath. He doesn't name it, but Lynn does. She calls it the one that heard everything. Visitors begin arriving not to see, but to feel. Some stay a few hours, some days. They speak less and listen more. To the snow, the wind, the hush of old pine, the music of footsteps on packed earth. And in that quiet, something begins to bloom, a kind of memory, not held in the mind, but in the body, in the space between silence and breath. A letter arrives on the wind, tied with twine, nestled in a birch bark scroll, its edges softened by mist. No name, no sender, only one line, written in faded ink. To those who still keep wonder warm. Lynn places it in the heart of the studio, not on a shelf, not in a drawer, just resting atop a cushion of downy moss. The children treat it like a sacred artifact. They never touch it, but they look at it often, especially before dreams. It seems to pulse softly, like something breathing beneath the words. That night, snow falls without sound, heavier, slower, as if blanketing the land in permission to forget all haste. Lanterns dim slightly, their glow growing denser, richer. They're not fading. They're not. The artisan begins shaping something new, different from lanterns, different from sculptures. He won't say what it is. He just works by moonlight. Lynn watches from the doorway, her shawl wrapped tight. She doesn't ask. Some creations aren't meant to be explained. She simply brings him warm broth when the stars lean lower, and he nods in thanks without breaking the rhythm of his hands. One evening, the children invite Lynn to the loft. They've made something for her. A blanket, woven from bits of felt, silk scraps, dried herbs, and tiny poems sewn along the edge. Each poem is only one line. The moon wears quiet like a robe. I love you like lanterns, love the dark. Even the snow listens when you sigh. Lynn traces each stitch with her fingertip, eyes glistening with gratitude too soft for words. She wraps herself in it that night and dreams of floating slowly, gently on a river made of lullabies. In the weeks that follow, small wonders appear more frequently. A candle that refuses to melt. A shadow shaped like a storybird. A single snowflake that lingers 4 minutes on the palm before sighing into steam. No one explains these things. They simply nod at them, quietly, as if to say, yes, of course. This is how it's always been. The artisan finishes his secret creation. It's not large, not ornate, just a small stone basin filled with water. But at dawn, it reflects only starlight, even when the sky is bright blue. He places it beneath the arbor and says nothing. The children begin calling it the memory pool. When someone sits beside it long enough, very still, very quiet, they see flashes in the water. A lost toy, a whispered apology, the face of someone who once sang to them. It never shows what they expect, only what they forgot they needed. Lynn begins to sit by it often, not to search, just to be reminded of softness. The lanterns overhead glow a little brighter when she does, like they remember to. The snow finally begins to melt, not quickly, not dramatically, but like a sigh at the end of a long, quiet lullaby. Drips echo gently from the eaves, forming rivulets that braid themselves through the grove like silver threads. The children run barefoot again, their laughter soft and sparkling, like tiny bells in the mist. Lanterns begin to sway not from wind, but from awakening, as though they, too, have been dreaming. Lynn walks the trail slowly, hand brushing against saplings now dusted in new buds. Each step leaves a gentle imprint that vanishes within minutes earth, forgiving itself for being too cold. She carries no tools, no journal, only her breath, only presence. When she returns to the studio, a surprise waits. A stranger, standing near the arbor, head bowed in quiet reverence. He wears no shoes, only a cloak stitched with tiny mirrored beads that catch light like thoughts catching wind. He speaks little, only says, "I've come for what I left behind." Lynn doesn't ask what that is. She simply invites him to sit, offers warm tea steeped with wild ginger and peace. He sits for 3 days. He says nothing more, but each night he places a single item at the well of whispers: a folded paper crane, a chipped flute, a small pouch filled with polished seeds. On the 4th morning, he is gone, but where he sat, a lantern now stands, when Lynn did not place. It is woven from silence itself. No light, just presence. The artisan finds her there and kneels beside the lantern. He doesn't touch it, only says, "Some returns aren't meant to be seen, only felt." The sky that night is lavender and pale gold, the color of forgotten lullaby. Lanterns dance in the branches like stories finally exhaled. And then, the first bird sings. Not loud, not showy. Just one note clear, clean, and round. Like a bell at the end of winter, Lynn closes her eyes and lets the sound wrap around her. It doesn't pull her forward. It reminds her that time itself is gentle here. Spring does not rush. It remembers how to arrive softly. A few days later, the children gather stones from the creek bed and paint tiny messages on them. They leave them beside lanterns, beneath trees, at the threshold of the studio. Little secrets offered to the earth. You are still beautiful, even if no one is looking. Sometimes I dream in colors I haven't seen yet. I love the way quiet feels. No one claims them. No one needs to. They belong to the grove now. Lynn begins creating again, not to teach, not to preserve, but to feel. Each lantern becomes more delicate, more open. Some have no tops, some have no bottoms. Just floating spirals that catch wind and hum gently in the evenings. She names them whispers that travel, and when the wind picks up at dusk, you can almost hear them singing your name, even if you've never been here. The studio windows are always open now. Not for air, but for the feeling that nothing is separate. Inside, the scent of oiled wood, dried citrus peel, and soft ink on parchment. Outside, the rustle of branches, the laughter of nearby brooks, and in between only breath. Visitors continue to come, but they speak less. Many simply sit beneath lanterns, with closed eyes and open palms. Some cry, some smile. All leave lighter than they arrived. Lynn keeps a small bowl by the door now, filled with slips of paper. Not for taking, but for leaving behind. A word you don't know how to carry anymore. They are folded and stored in a lacquered chest called the unspoken library. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, The chest creaks open a hair, and the faintest whisper escapes. It doesn't say anything in particular. It only sounds like peace. The artisan's hands move slower now, but with more intention. He shapes one final lantern. A large one hung high in the central pine, its frame carved from driftwood and wrapped in translucent silk dyed by dawn itself. It glows not like a flame, but like memory. He calls it home. And after he names it, he doesn't make another. Not because he's done, but because some lights are meant to be the last in a line. A gentle punctuation. Lynn finds herself drawn to the stream more often these days. It's louder now, full of meltwater and murmured conversations between rock and root. She dips her feet in, lets the cold remind her of presence, of pause. Above her, dragonflies shimmer like stained glass thoughts. She watches one hover over her lantern sketchbook, as if reading it. When it lands, she whispers, "What story would you carry?" And when it lifts again, she closes the book. That's enough for today. Children begin to build their own tiny lantern groves. Miniature trails behind mossy stones, secret circles of candles around tree stumps. One even strings buttons and glass beads through branches, calling it the tinkling forest. No one teaches them. They just remember. One dusk, as the stars begin to stretch, Lynn sees a child standing on the edge of the clearing, staring toward the hills. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asks softly. The child nods, still staring. "Who?" the child answers with a whisper so quiet, it floats. "The part of me I forgot when I grew." Lynn doesn't reply. Together, they wait. The stars blink slowly into view, one by one, like lanterns finding their courage. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, something inside both of them begins to return. Not as it was, but as it was always meant to be. The days now stretch longer, golden with warmth, and filled with quiet tasks. Lynn wakes to birdsong instead of frost. She opens her windows and the scent of lavender and damp earth drifts in familiar. Comforting, like a blanket aired out from memory. Lanterns no longer glow to keep darkness at bay. They glow for the joy of it. Each one is a silent song, humming softly above the paths and porches, suspended like patient thoughts. The artisan spends more time sitting than sculpting. He speaks less, listens more. Sometimes to the trees, sometimes to the creek, sometimes to the sound of his own breathing. Lynn joins him often. They sit without need for words, watching the shadows stretch and fold. And one evening, he turns to her, eyes soft like candlelight. "You've built a forest of remembering," he says. She doesn't reply with words. She just nods, heart full and still. The villagers begin planting things. Not just gardens, but ideas. They carve stories into stones, leave feathers in fence posts, tie bells to the tips of young saplings. Nothing is organized. Everything is loved. A traveler arrives, weather-worn and silent. She kneels beside the memory pool and places a pressed violet on the edge. Then she weeps not with sorrow, but with release. Lynn kneels beside her and places a hand on her back. Nothing else is needed. The sky that night turns a deep, velvet blue, pierced by thousands of stars each, one pulsing gently like the breath of an ancient being. Some say they see the lantern shapes mirrored in the heavens. Others say the stars are simply jealous. In the warmth of this new season, children begin sleeping outside again. Blankets laid in circles, soft pillows shared. Above them, the lanterns spin slowly on their strings, casting soft spirals of light that swirl into dreams. They call these nights. Lynn joins them one evening, curled at the edge. Before they fall asleep, the children take turns whispering things they are grateful for. Not out loud, just into their lanterns. One child whispers, "I'm glad my dog remembers me." Another, I'm glad sadness doesn't last forever. A third, sleepily. I'm glad for warm dirt and the sound moss makes. Each lantern flickers as the words settle inside them like warm tea poured into a waiting cup. When Lynn finally closes her eyes, the last thing she sees is the artisan, standing just beyond the edge of the circle. He doesn't approach. Smiling, the wind tugs at his sleeves like an old friend wanting one last dance. And when the sun rises, the children stretch and yawn under a sky already tinted with morning peach, but the artisan is gone. No footprints, no tools, no final message. Only the great lantern in the central pine swaying slowly, still glowing. Lynn doesn't cry when she realizes he's gone. Instead, she lights incense beneath the great lantern. A blend he once made: cedar bark, jasmine petal, and a single shred of orange peel. The scent rises in slow spirals, wrapping around her like an invisible shawl. The children instinctively speak softer that morning. Even the birds seem to pause between songs. A silence falls, not heavy, not hollow, but sacred, as if the grove itself is bowing in thanks. Lynn keeps the studio open, just as he did. She does not take his place. No one can. She simply tends, polishes, listens, waits. People come not for lanterns now. Others ask for silence. All leave with something they didn't know they needed. On the eve of the Lantern Moon celebration, long whispered about but never practiced, line hosts the first. No decorations. No grand feasts. Just a path of small lights, woven from seed husks and river reeds, leading to the memory pool. Each visitor carries a lantern they've made, however small, however odd. They gather silently, encircling the pool. Lynn begins with a breath, then a whisper. This light remembers for us. One by one, lanterns are placed beside the water. Not in it, just near enough to be reflected. Some flicker, some glow, bold and steady. One hums a soft note like a lullaby remembered through tears. Lynn places hers last. It is simple, woven from her first failed sketch, now folded and reborn. When it touches the ground, the pool glows. Not brightly, but deeply. As if all the forgotten dreams, all the quiet wishes, have found a place to rest. The villagers do not cheer. They close their eyes, and the silence sings. A child asks softly, "Will the lanterns ever fade?" Lynn smiles and replies, "Only when we stop believing and wonder." The days after are golden. Everything continues, but slower. The pace of petals blooming, of moss reaching, of hearts healing. Lynn receives a letter. No stamp, no signature. Inside, a single line written in the artisan's hand. The lanterns were never the gift. You were. She presses the letter to her chest and lets herself cry, not for loss, but for fullness. The children grow. Some stay, some wander, but all leave a lantern behind. Some are shaped like boats, others like birds. One, like a question mark curled around a tiny mirror. Lynn hangs each one with care. They do not speak of legacies here, only of echoes, soft ones. That night, the breeze carries a familiar scent: cedar, jasmine, orange. And for a moment, beneath the stars, Lynn hears a faint voice in the wind. Not calling her, just reminding her she is never truly alone. She closes her eyes, and the lanterns sway in agreement. Years pass, but in the lantern grove, time does not feel heavy. Seasons still arrive like familiar stories, rewritten in softer tones. Winters sigh instead of bite. Summers bloom without shouting. Lynn's hair turns silver slowly, strand by strand, like threads of moonlight woven into her braid. Children still come, but now, They are the children of children who once danced under the pine. They arrive with wonder in their eyes and questions on their tongues. Lynn answers them not with facts, but with feeling. She tells them that some stories are meant to be held, not solved. That mystery is not always a problem, it can be a comfort. And each time she says this, the lanterns seem to nod. The memory pool becomes a sacred place, now framed by soft stones inscribed with fragments of thoughts. Kindness lives longer than stone. Be gentle with your leaving. Silence remembers to. Some visitors leave without saying a word. They simply bow at the edge and let the stillness carry their intent. Lynn begins teaching again, not with structure, but with spirit. She guides hands, not decisions. Shows how to weave with pauses, how to shape with listening. One student asks, "How do you know when a lantern is finished?" She answers, "When it no longer needs you." And the child nods as if they've always known. A small festival begins each spring, unannounced. People bring offerings not of gold or grain, but of stories told by firelight, written on leaves, sung to the trees. The lanterns glow brighter those nights, as if fed not by wax or oil, but by shared breath. One evening, a stranger arrives carrying a single, flickering lantern shaped like a teardrop. Inside is a small folded map. He says nothing, only places the lantern on the stone table in Lynn's studio and leaves. Curious, she unfolds the map. It is the path to the grove, drawn in symbols, memories, and wind. At the top it reads, "To find peace, follow what you once forgot." She leaves the lantern untouched, and each visitor who sees it seems to understand. They speak more gently after, walk more slowly, breathe more deeply. Lantern light now marks more than paths. It marks moments, weddings, goodbyes, forgiveness, each wrapped in silk and silence. At dusk, when the world turns gold and breathless, Lynn walks among them. She touches each lantern with her fingertips, eyes closed, as if feeling for something not yet said. Sometimes, she hums old tunes, songs that only trees and wind remember. She no longer dreams of elsewhere, only of here, of stillness held in light. And on the quietest nights, when even the owls hush, she sits beneath the great pine. The lantern above her sways like a heartbeat, and she whispers into the hush, "Thank you for waiting." The forest around the grove matures. Old trees lean in closer, their roots more gnarled, their trunks wrapped in moss like velvet robes. They do not crowd, they embrace. The clearing narrows just slightly, as if to say, "This place is meant for those who truly seek it," and still they come. Wanderers, hopeful ones. They do not always know why they're drawn here, only that something inside feels lighter upon arrival. Some call it sacred. Others say it reminds them of something just out of reach, like the scent of a memory or the shape of a dream. Lynn begins crafting a special kind of lantern, one not for light, but for listening. Each is made from wind chimes, soft cloth, and delicate paper laced with holes that sing when the wind passes through. She calls them whispers. They do not glow. They do not guide. They wait. One traveler, who had not spoken for 10 years, sits beside a whisper's lantern. After an hour, he murmurs, "I remember the sound of my mother's laughter." Then he weeps, not loudly, not painfully, like a stream returning after drought. Each year, the grove shifts just slightly. Paths change, moss deepens. Lanterns age. Some fall, their frames crumbled, their silk faded. But Len never replaces them. They are left to rest where they land, gently, reverently. Children now refer to these as sleeping lights. They leave acorns beside them, sometimes feathers. Once, a tiny poem written in chalk on stone. Even light must sleep, but dreams do not dim. One evening, Lynn stands before the memory pool, arms folded in thought. She closes her eyes and dips a lantern into the water, not to light it, but to let it drift. It floats slowly to the center, turning lazily, casting soft ripples that catch the reflection of stars. When it reaches the middle, stops, suspended, held, and for a moment the entire grove breathes in unison. A hush so deep, the earth seems to pause. In that breath, time folds, and Lynn sees just for a flicker the first lantern she ever made. The boy who'd brought the rice paper, the artisan's soft smile. The first time she felt belonging. She exhales. The moment fades, but the warmth lingers. From then on, others begin sending lanterns adrift in the pool. They do not speak over them, they simply release and watch. Some spin, some sink, some float 4 days before fading into the mist. Lynn carves a tiny sign near the water's edge. Place, not for wishes, but for peace, and that becomes the truth of the grove. A place not to change your fate, but to rest beside it. To honor the journey. To whisper to what hurts, and hear it whisper back. Lynn's steps have grown slower now, not out of weakness, but out of care. Every footfall is a choice. She does not hurry, there is nowhere she needs to be but here. Visitors begin calling her the Lantern Keeper. She never claims the title. Instead, she bows to it, like one bows to an old friend. She no longer weaves lanterns every day. She tends to them like a gardener does ancient trees, quiet pruning, gentle coaxing, a whispered word now and then. There is a special place she's clear, the small circle of smooth stones, tucked near the oldest tree. She names it the listening ring. No one speaks inside it. No one needs to. You sit, breathe, and feel. Feel the moss beneath your palms, the hush of the wind, the slow language of trees remembering. Children sit there with closed eyes, then tell stories they never knew they had. An old woman once sat for hours, then stood and said, "I remember who I was before the war." Then walked away smiling. No one asked what she meant. That's the way of the grove. It doesn't explain, it unfolds. Lanterns shaped like musical notes appear one spring. No one knows who made them. Each chimes only once per day. Soft, pure, perfect. They call them echoes. Some believe they sound when someone far away remembers this place. Others say they sound when someone needs to. Lynn listens for them each dusk. She never hears the same note twice. One evening, as fireflies rise like tiny lanterns of their own, she walks the path past the weeping willow. There, hanging alone, is a small lantern made of rain-hardened paper and twine. On it, a message. When you are gone, who will remember the light? Lynn touches it gently and smiles. The next day, she finds a child at her doorstep, eyes wide, silent, carrying a satchel full of reeds and silk scraps. Lynn does not ask why they've come. She simply places a teacup in their hand and shows them where to sit. They stay. Weeks pass, then months. The child doesn't speak until the first snowfall. They point at a lantern swinging gently in the cold wind and whisper, "It sounds like my mother's voice." Lynn nods and replies. She teaches them how to soften reeds over steam, how to sew with silence, how to let the wind finish what your fingers start. One night, as the stars flicker like sleepy sparks, the child leaves a lantern in the listening ring. No light, just a note tied to the frame. Not all things that shine need fire. And Lynn feels the grove sigh in agreement. The artisan once said, "The lanterns are alive, in the way that kindness is alive." Now, Lynn understands. They grow, they fade, they return. Always, always returning. Spring returns with a softness that feels like a promise kept. The grove hums not with activity, but with peace. Lanterns sway without wind. Chimes ring without touch. It is as if the place has learned to sing in stillness. Lynn rises one morning before the birds. The sky is silver, and dew clings to every petal, every thread of silk like stardust forgotten in the grass. She walks the entire grove barefoot, slowly. Stopping at each lantern, she bows not with sadness, but with gratitude. At the memory pool, she finds the child now older, taller, still full of wonder waiting. They don't speak. They simply hold out a small box. Inside, a lantern. Tiny, delicate, woven from threads of Lynn's old robes, and a single petal from the first blossom of spring. No words written. No light lit. Just the shape of care. Lynn smiles, and for the first time in many years, she closes her eyes and rests her hand in another's. That night, she tells one last story. Not with her voice. She places her first lantern, carefully restored, into the center of the listening ring. Then she sits beside it, closes her eyes, and sleeps. By morning, she is gone. Not taken. Just gently absent, as though the grove itself had needed her, and now, having been loved enough, had let her go. The villagers arrive not with mourning, but with reverence. They do not cry loudly. They whisper. One by one, they light a lantern and place it in the grove not to replace her, but to thank her. By evening, the entire forest glows. Each branch, each stone, touched by gold and warmth and memory. The child now grown takes her place, though they never say so aloud. They do not try to become her, they simply care. And the grove welcomes them with quiet joy. A new sign is hung near the entrance. Carved into weathered wood, it reads, "Come gently, leave slower light remembers." Years pass. The grove thrives. Some say it's grown larger than before. Others say it hasn't grown at all, just deepened. The new lantern keeper writes in a small journal each night. Not for records, not for others. Just for the grove. One entry reads, "She is the hush in the leaves, the warmth in the wax, the story that whispers when the wind sighs through silk. She is here, still." One autumn evening, as mist curls through the trees like sleepy breath, a traveler arrives. They've walked far, following only the sound of a chime heard in a dream. At the grove's entrance, they pause. There is no gate, only a path of soft earth and welcoming quiet. And so, they walk forward slowly, reverently into the light. The traveler steps gently, as if afraid to disturb the hush. Their boots leave no imprint on the moss. Even the birds do not startlingly tilt their heads in curiosity. A lantern, shaped like a bellflower, swings above them. It doesn't chime, it sighs. And in that sound, the traveler hears a lullaby from a childhood they barely remember. They pause at the listening ring. Inside, no one speaks. An old man sits beside a girl, both with their eyes closed, palms upturned. The traveler joins them. No one asks why. In the grove, no questions are required. Later, they find the memory pool. And for a long moment, they simply watch their reflection ripple beneath the drifting lanterns. One glows a little brighter as they approach. No message, no name, just light, softly held. They dip their fingers into the water and feel not cold, but calm. It spreads through them, from fingertips to breath, like warm tea on a snowy morning. As twilight gathers, the traveler finds a smooth stone near the elder pine. Carved into it, nearly faded. "If you find peace here, leave some behind." So, they do. Not a lantern, not a coin, but a memory whispered to the wind, of a moment when they felt seen, of laughter beside a fire, of love they thought had been forgotten. They close their eyes and whisper, and the grove listens. Somewhere deep in the forest, a new lantern lights itself. No hands touched it, no match struck, only a story remembered, only peace made real. And that, in the end, is all the grove ever asked. That we remember gently, that we carry softly, that we shine quickly, always for someone else finding their way. As night falls, the grove does not sleep. It glows. 1,000 lanterns, each with a memory, each a whisper, a lullaby, a promise kept. And in the hush between heartbeats, as stars blink overhead like ancient eyes, the story breathes. Here, you are safe. Here, you are light. Here, you are home.